Broadcasting high atop of Florida's peninsula at 108 feet. This is Alpha Mike on. And today's episode, we will discuss on episode 91. Heads up, the subject has a camera. Interesting subject. There's a lot to really talk about. This is being brought to you by the Think Out of the Box series. As you know, we have 5 platforms that we use on Radio Cop Nation. So this is on the Think Out of the Box platform series, which is for law enforcement to have a different directional thinking pattern on this specific subject we're going to talk about now. It is, I don't want to use the word plagued because it would not be proper, but it has affected law enforcement to a great degree and to the shame of a whole lot of agencies. And it needs to be perfected. Law enforcement has to meet the challenge head on, and we're going to talk about that. There is a lot to unfold, always on Radio Cop Nation, and as a reminder, you can always pick us up on RadarCopNation.com, and you scroll down. As you know, the icons come up, and you can connect with us. On our Instagram page we just created, it is at Radar Cop Podcast, all one word, and there you can look at our new Instagram page that we have posted up there. So, as always, you know, the social media aspect has a lot of wasted time and effort, but it also is a place that law enforcement needs to dwell in, and so we are happy to be a part of that. Now, I've got a lot of interesting stories, got a lot of good news about our superhero co-host, and I can't wait to, bring you some exciting news on their lives and some things that are going on, as well as, our leadership quote of the week. So let's not hold up the line here because we got a lot to go on, and the cafeteria line is getting bigger by the second. So let's hit it. This week's leadership quote comes to us by the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan. And the quote is, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." So I think it's very interesting what he said, and it's going to really tune into what we're doing today. And we're going to speak on a little bit of, the First Amendment issues. And so when you talk about freedom, it talks about how the founding fathers created our fundamental rights in this country and how they kind of get trampled on every day. And some of us are willing and sheep to slaughter, basically accept it. But there's a lot to talk about there. But before we get to that, as I told you, I wanted to talk a little bit about some good news from our superhero co-host. And primarily, we have 3 of our superhero co-hosts that have generated me with good news, and I want to share that with the audience so they know what's going on. Now, first of all, you haven't heard from a co-host for a little while. Gave them a little bit of a break. Summer season, kids getting out of school, family issues going on. When you're a parent, there's some major events in life, not only events that your child will go through first this, first that, first the other thing, birthday parties, and so forth. But summer vacations are one of them. So we're respecting that, giving them some breathing room. So we should kick back up with our super co host right after the 4th of July. Slowly start picking them up as they become available. And we got a lot of interesting shows, folks. So don't forget our website on RadioCopNation.com has been changed to upcoming events. You basically just see the current event and the next one that follows. But if you scroll on the top browser, it'll show you the 5 platforms and the list, the endless list of shows that are coming with no dates there. As the co-host becomes available, we throw that on the platform. So what I'm going to start doing is the beginning of the month, like let's say July now, I will introduce the lineup for the month of July. So you basically know what's coming for the month of July. Now, our co-host have shared with me, and as I said, I'm going to share with the audience because although, we go by code names here, and some people have asked, well, why do you guys do that? Well, it was something that Mike Sierra came up with, and it was it originally started as part of the gimmick of the podcast. Then we kind of understood that we were entering a field in the podcast where people really don't like law enforcement, or you have the other spectrum. Law enforcement officials kind of frown upon you if you start talking about trade secrets. We don't like that. So as a result, we went with, I'm Alpha Mike, and it's Forensic Alphabet, your first and last name. That's all it is. We got Mike Sierra and so forth. The cop, which is Alpha Quebec, is his forensic name, but we just call him the cop because it fit right in. And then Wonder Woman and so forth. So some of them have forensic nicknames. Some of them we just gave them the nickname. But from our co-host, 2 or 3 of them are active law enforcement. The rest are retired. Wealth of information, and they are subject matter experts in a lot of areas. Now, that being said, get off to the good scoop, Alpha. You're holding up the chow line. We want to know what's going on. I received 2 phone calls, and of course one that I was gracious enough to be a part of. But I received the first phone call from our friendly neighborhood Wonder Woman, which has told me under no certain terms that I will, as you know, if you're an active listener of the podcast, shall and will are biblical terms, will be in attendance for Wonder Woman's wedding. Yes, that's right, folks. Remember when we did the Wonder Woman episode? Told you something was a little strange. And we talked about Sparky and, which is now Vinny Boombots. And we discussed his confidential informant to us. But anyway, that putting aside, Wonder Woman will be getting married, and no better place for the Alpha Mike to be there with microphone in hand and filling in the gap. So we're very happy that that's occurring. I also received a phone call from the cop, one of our best superhero co-hosts, and he gave me the great news that he got promoted. 31 years in law enforcement, he has been promoted to the rank of lieutenant. So we give him a big hug, and we wish him all the best and what's coming ahead because well deserved. Well deserved, my friends. This individual has a humongous amount of experience, and that agency is going to do well with him in that command position. And lastly, as a lot of our nation listeners have known, that Mike Sierra had a little hiccup over with Mickey at Disney in one of our series that we talked about carrying concealed and how accidentally he had a weapon on his bag and going through checkpoint. And he basically turned himself in and told security uh, that he had the weapon and so forth. So they called the deputies of Orange County Sheriff's Office, and no arrest, nothing like that happened. But the deputies were in a very particularly strange position because it's an off duty, so you work for Mickey that day. And everybody knows that a Mickey Mouse town, there is no crime. So things are very well protected. And as a result, the deputies sometimes are in awkward positions because they're serving the master, which is Mickey. And so there was no arrest in that case. And but they did seize the weapon. They confiscated it for the safety of all beloved Mickey lovers. And Mike Sierra went on his happy way. But it has been months and months and months, and he's patiently waiting, and there was no action from the state attorney's office as well. Even more good news there. But after more months of waiting and waiting and nothing happening, he basically started making phone calls. And after several phone calls, it was the tap dancing commenced, and this one, that one, the other one, who knows? This one knows, I don't know. And basically, there was a holdup on the chow line. Couple of phone calls were made, and so shout out to Deputy Gonzalez over in Orange County Sheriff's Office that helped me help Mike Sierra get his weapon back. So three outstanding stories of our super co-hosts, and we're happy that they're happy and everything's coming together there. So we got that out of the way, folks, because you got to talk the good stuff. You can't only talk about the bad stuff. So I'm glad to bring you that news. Now, speaking of bad news, I'll tell you my funny little story. Yesterday, I ventured out into technology land, and I wanted to become the proud owner of an Apple Watch. I went to the provider, or the carrier that I have, and did some window shopping. And there's a great young man by the name of Jason Goodman, and at the Wiregrass Mall up by my neck of the woods, the T-Mobile shop there. And Jason had sold me the original iPhones that I have. So we went back to him. Great service. Outstanding young man. So he gave me the difference between Series 3, Series 4, 40 millimeter versus 44 millimeter. And, we talked about, tag, title, tax, all that kind of stuff. And we made the necessary stamps of approval on what we wanted. And we're basically getting all the phones geared up, syncing in with our phones and our watches. Everything's going good. So at one point, I got all excited and I took off my G-Shock phone. My G-Shock watch. And as you all know, if you're in law enforcement, some of us actually believe that when you were in your mother's womb, you were wearing a G-Shock as you were birthed, because no other watch for law enforcement was ever made but G-Shock. Today, after this story. This is more evident than ever. G-Shock, the watch that gets beat, kicked on, stepped on, rolled over by cars, still taken. So for law enforcement out there hustling, bustling, tussling, it is the preferred watch. But I ventured out because I'm retired after 27 years of dedicated service. I treat myself to some of what the millennials are doing nowadays. And of course, technology wise, I'm a little limited, so I hit the buttons and whatever happens, happens. So I took off my G Shock watch, put it in my pocket, anticipating my watch, my new Apple Watch, to be placed on my wrist. So Jason took it over to the little portal area they have where they have charging ports. And, so I'm briefly waiting for the Apple Watch to be charged up so he can give it back to me. But for some reason, I said, well, you know what? I'll just put back on my G-Shock. Now, I'm one of those guys that have a watch on forever. Forever. It never comes off. So waiting 5 minutes was too much for me. So I quickly covered my wrist where there's a distinction between color between the watch band and my color. And, there's, wow, that's his real color. Look, that's the sun and that's him. So I put on my G-Shock again. So when I did get the Apple Watch, I put it in my pocket. Yep. Now, of course, being retired law enforcement, we are lovers of 511 cargo pants. So we wear cargo pants, pockets on the side, always tactically ready. And in Florida, you have tactical shorts. So I have my tactical shorts on with my pockets to the side. And so I quickly put the Apple Watch in that tactical pocket. And everything was good. I was feeling good. We left, got in the car, drove home. Now, during the ride, big weather storms, starts raining and all that. No excuse. This is my era here. Got home, entered through the garage. My house is completely covered with tile. Beautiful tile. Whole thing. I have no carpets. I live in Florida, for Christ's sakes. Why would I want a carpet? All tile. And I walk in, and as I walk in, I'm told, can I get, and they ask me for something. I have to reach into my wallet to get it, which, remember, is in my cargo shirts next to the watch. As I pull out my wallet to retrieve what I was asked for, the watch falls out. As it comes out, of course, I tried the attempted grab, not fast enough, and all of a sudden, plop, like an egg. Well, I said to myself, look, I'm not new at this. This ain't my first rodeo. I know nothing happened. As I turned the watch to the side and I looked at the screen, of course, I went into denial by saying to myself, no, that's dirt. It's got to be dirt. It's got to be dirt. And I rubbed my finger across the top of the screen. And yes, folks, the spider web was there. Spider web, you might ask? Well, it is the crack in the armor. Brand new, out of the box, not even an hour old. Cracked. Yep. So how's your day going? They told me, let's get an iWatch. It'll be fun. You'll see. So anyway, all going to be corrected. Jason gave me some pointers on how to get it fixed. And great concept they have now. You get the insurance, which he had told me about. Now it's like, insurance, how much is this guy going to cost me? But he made an interesting point on the sale. He said, "Look, you never know. There's a difference between paying $200 or $300 to fix a screen than 60." I go, "Well, you're absolutely right." So I said, "Man, I'll throw it on there. I can always cancel it whenever I want." Perfect timing. But wish it never happened, but it did happen. So it's got to be fixed. That's all. What are you going to do? Sometimes, like my buddy used to say, sometimes you can take the elevator, sometimes you got to take the stairs. Yeah, what are you going to do? All right, so let's keep on moving along here because we got a lot of things to do. And as you're sitting there chuckling over my misery over the iWatch, we'll keep things rolling here. Now, uh, recommended reading. I'm dwelling in this book. It's very interesting. I've only gotten to like the first or second chapter, so we're not that much into it. In between dropping iWatches, Apple Watches, I haven't had time. But interested read by Thomas Sowell of the Hoover Institute and Stanford University, a book by the name of Dismantling America. He's an economist, and this man has, I suggest that you Google, you look him up, Thomas Sowell, Sowell, and listen to him. Listen to some of his interviews. He's 89 years old, God bless him, and he talks about the craziness of government, how they basically can never do anything right, and how that's all fits into our economy. So, Dismantling America. That's the name of the book, and highly recommend it. As I read along, and of course, we're going to have that in our sidebar series. We're going to be quoting. That's why I'm reading it, folks, by the way. So, remember, we just don't come at you with an empty gun. It's always loaded. Always got to be loaded. All right, now, I've bored you enough. It's time to assemble the in-service class. Kids, I need you to simmer down in the background. Sit down in your chairs. We're about to go into Heads Up. Subject has a camera. Episode 91. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the main event. And what a main event this is going to be. Basically, it is a First Amendment audit. And you're probably wondering, what in the world is a First Amendment audit? Well, I'm here to tell you. And I'm also going to surprise you a little bit on what we think it is, what it really is, and how law enforcement, which is we, need to prepare for this a lot better than we've been doing, because it has not been very nice. First Amendment audit is an American social movement categorized by its practitioners known as auditors. Who would have known? As activism and citizen journalists, they test constitutional rights, in particular the right to photographers and video recorders in public spaces. So right now, some of you are listening to what I'm saying and say, "Oh, he's talking about troublemakers." So there, hold on to that thought right now. We're going to start taking some of that away from you. And auditors also believe that the movement promotes transparency and open government. Now, of course, we know that some auditors don't know how to act. And so there's in every project, every experiment in America, there's good and bad. So, and that's whether it's a doctor, lawyer, police officer, auditor. Yeah, bad and good of everything. And so I looked at this, and I actually stumbled upon this when I was doing some research on an upcoming sidebar episode that we were going to do about the wacky left and how they are dismantling law enforcement every cockamamie project at a time. And as I did some research, I threw something in the search, and bingo, this thing came up. Now, it wasn't particularly what I was looking for, but it interested me. And I came across an individual that was doing his podcast, or not his podcast. I'm sorry. I'm acting like a radio host. Foolish. His YouTube, and at that time, as I stumbled upon it, I said, well, let me give this guy the benefit of the doubt. Let me see what it's going on. He had I saw some of the interactions. Very professional, but pushy, but just a touch of arrogance to go with the script. So he never crossed the line. He always had his foot on the line. And the cops were stummering and stammering, trying to figure out what the next move was, and they were losing. And I started picking up on some of the techniques, and the juices started flowing, and I said, wow, I've got hours and hours here of fun training that should be done. And if anybody knows me, they know that when I get on a specific training episode, the juices start flowing and we start building. So this is one of these projects that I'm starting to get involved in. So I take this journey. But anyway, let me kind of read to you their position, if for lack of a better term. We believe that many of our rights and civil liberties as American citizens on American soil are at great risk, and that a simple act of civil disobedience has the power to effect great change. While we have no interest or intention in breaking any law, we are willing to stand up for freedom and the Constitution at any time and at any place, and do so in a responsible, productive manner. Okay, I like that. It is our goal to create a free and open discussion whenever possible in an effort to educate both ourselves and anyone with a desire to learn. A well-known rule of government is that the ignorance is no excuse for the law, of course. It is our stand that we as Americans have been either uninformed or misinformed regarding our laws and rights far too long. I agree. We are not attorneys or scholars. However, we have been involved in professional photography for over 30 years and have had our rights and freedoms challenged more times than we can remember. No one group or person has the ability to effect change across the board. However, we are committed to doing our part and continuing to stand up for our constitutional rights to free press and the right to take photographers and videos in public. So I read that, and of course, a couple once in a while, a little alarm bell rang, but I agree. That's right. Don't be shocked. If you're a brother in blue, you're sitting back right now. You're starting to hyperventilate. Calm down. Sit down. And let's have a conversation about where we're going. So the gentleman that I just read their YouTube page, about page, has a GoFundMe and so forth like that, but I'm not necessarily promoting that. But if you're willing to give, it's your money. Excuse me. His YouTube thing is called the Armageddon Press, and we'll post on our show notes maybe one or two encounters just for you to see how it flows, how he flows with the law enforcement scenario. It's not to embarrass anybody in uniform. It is for educational purposes. Now, with that being said, let's continue to move because we're 30 minutes into this and there's a whole lot on the agenda. This will not be a one episode podcast. We're going to have more, and I'll break down the curriculum, how it's going to flow a little bit better for you. Excuse me. So the group now they do these First Amendment audits. It's about photography. It's about videotaping in public areas. What are we talking about? Well, police stations, libraries, post office, etc. And they just walk in. There's sort of a technique to it, and the challenges are outrageously funny and horrifying at the same time. Horrifying because you kind of notice at times, not all the time, but at times, governmental employees are brain dead when it comes to the First Amendment. Now, I've dabbled in law, as everybody knows. I am not a lawyer, have never played one on TV either. But being a law enforcement officer, I always thought to be studious in brushing up on the law to perform my duties. When I started in my career early on, I was told by my supervisor, "You're doing pretty good in that law thing. You know, you always come up with the answers. Why don't you study some Florida law so we can see how we gel our police reports and all that and put that in with, a little bit of knowledge you have." And that's what I did for about 25 of my 27 years of my career. And of course, I still do it because it's something that I liked and I enjoyed. And I've talked on this podcast about who mentored me in law, which is a recently retired judge from federal bench. And but that's not the point. We're not going there because I'm not playing lawyer, that's for sure. And there's enough lawyers in the world to corrupt the world. You don't need my advice. But I'm outraged in the little bit of training or the non-existent training that some law enforcement officers have when it comes to this issue and how it has not been taken seriously. Now, I want to break away and give a little, war story because it wouldn't be a law enforcement podcast if you don't have a couple of war stories. So back in November of 03, Miami was faced with, and I was a law enforcement officer in Miami-Dade County, but law enforcement was given the assignment of dealing with what, at the time, I don't even know if they still exist, but I'm sure they do. They're probably under another name, FTAA protesters. And at the time, and they stand for the free trade area of the Americas. Of course, the ACLU, the lawyers, coached them and told them how to act and what to do. But when that issue was dealt with in 03, they were well organized. So they had the rebel rousers, they had the peacemakers, they had the camera groups broken out in the perimeters around the troublemakers. So when police encountered the troublemakers, pictures and videoing of it could be gathered. They even had an outer perimeter that in case police try to encounter the person with the camera, they were being filmed by another camera. So what resulted in 03 was a lot of lawsuits and a lot of money was paid out. In particular, there was one from Miami-Dade County, and this was in dealing with stripping procedures at the jail. And early on in my career, I had written a grievance about the stripping of misdemeanors, which was an ongoing practice in Miami-Dade. They didn't care who you were, what you were charged with as far as a misdemeanor. It was, stripped down to the way you were born and lift up or bend down with and cough. And this went on for forever. And I mean, it had been going on forever. I think since they opened up the doors of the place. So I found myself trying to have civil conversation about it with superiors. That didn't go nowhere. Then we went into memorandum form. That didn't go nowhere. So we put it in an official grievance. That grievance was heard. There was 3 stages to be heard: at the command level of the facility, the chief level that is chief over the facility, the director level of the agency, and then the last and final stage would be a hearing downtown administered by the county manager, which today is the county mayor. But when I reached the downtown area, they never really dealt with the issue. They stonewalled it for a future date. And this went on for years, and I never got the date. And I used to regularly, on a regular basis, at least once a year, used to call, hey, where's my date? Because as long as I'm calling and asking for it, my grievance is still open. It's not closed. So when the FTAA boys came into town, I don't know if I'm allowed to say boys without getting in trouble. So I'll say persons. When they came down, they brought lawyers with them before, during, and of course after the event, ready for the lawsuits. And in this specific case, to make a long story short, and some of you are saying too late, they sued. One of the pieces of evidence against Miami-Dade County was my grievance, which was probably about a little bit over 10 years old at the time, sitting on somebody's desk, not heard, ignored. The lawyers, they loved that because it was a cash cow. It showed deliberate indifference on the part of Miami-Dade County, and they won $500,000 for that stupidity. And I often tell people that when I went to the first level of the complaint process of the grievance, the commander or the captain of the facility, I had asked in my grievance that statute did not allow for the stripping of misdemeanors without being charged with prostitution. That was the statute. And we're doing it just because you're a misdemeanor. And, of course, first appearance and all this. So I had put a remedy as saying probable cause. So basically saying, if you write a memo saying if the officer has probable cause to do so, I think he's got a weapon, I think he might be harboring drugs, blah, 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 you can go ahead and do it. But the unofficial response was he pointed to his captain bars and he says, this is what gives me authority to do it. It was a joke. It was a freaking joke. So that was old school versus new school. And the old timers did a horrible job in preparing for the next battle. And I know there's a lot of them out there. This is baloney. Who does this guy think he is? But the bottom line is true. You've got to be willing, able, and prepared to turn into the next battlefield. You can't continue riding horses into battle. You've got to upgrade. And they didn't. So, long story short, that lawsuit was a part of what went down. So, all right, I've bored you enough with that. Let's get back into the meat and potatoes here. So, this group, and we described what First Amendment audit is. Basically, I break you down the scenario. They show up to traffic calls. Police officer stops somebody in a traffic offense. They might show up to that, start filming. The tactics pretty much are I broke them down into four elemental elements. Number one, the passive resistance, which is all I do is I film if outsiders, which means people that are not involved with the traffic stop, ask me questions, I kind of like ignore them. Or the other tactic is I could encounter them. But they usually try and, it's like you're going fishing and the little fish hooks onto the bait, but you're really looking for the big fish. So you reel the line back in and throw it back out, but you're looking for the big fish, not the little fish. So they, at one point, will encounter the officer. So let's say if the officer says, "What are you doing?" Now, the officer made point of contact. Their response is, "Officer, what's your name and badge number?" Okay, because the officer initiated contact. Interesting technique that they learned, because they learned this from the lawyers. And then sometimes you get the officer that gives them the actual name and badge number. They should have taught this in service or during the academy. But then you get the knuckleheads. And I'll give you one example, and I'll try to find it. A little pressed for time, but if not on this show, I'll post it on the next one, where this gentleman, Jason, he basically says to the officer, after point of contact, he says, "What's your name and badge number?" And he points to his chest area. This is my badge and his name tag. And he goes, "It's right here." And he goes, "Oh, really? Really? Do you do that in court when the judge asks you what your name is?" And he's right. It's 100% right. You don't. So why are you doing that in public, especially with people you don't know? To me, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. But that's one example. The other example is he is very professional in what we have courses in law enforcement, verbal judo. And it's kind of always be on top of the discussion. And he really does it so well that officers don't have a response for him, because one of the things that they did wrong was they weren't prepared for the event. But we'll get with that in a second about being prepared for the event. The other thing that the photographer does here, or the person videoing, they're well schooled and educated of where they're going, where the rule is, what is the rule, and what is the law. So, for example, if they go to the post office, they know that it's on a bulletin board in the post office posted, it's rule number 7. So if the postmaster encounters or engages them, they basically goes, "Well, I'm just doing what the government said you can do. It's on your bulletin board." Sometimes you get the postmaster doesn't even know what you're talking about. You read it to them. "Look, it's rule number 7." You read it, and they go, "Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, okay." And then they feel stupid. Sometimes you can basically say it's the law. Gives Supreme Court has made decisions about public buildings, lobby areas, access portals, entrances are accessible to the public. And so they take full advantage of that. But some of the comical ones is, walks into a police station with a video camera, and all of a sudden it's like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. Everybody's heads turning, green slime coming out of people's mouths. It's ridiculous, folks. You're a law enforcement agency. You should, and there's no excuse for it, that you're not prepared for this event. Now, I understand there's always a knucklehead in every agency. I worked with many of them that they couldn't tie their shoe. They were too big. They couldn't get out of their own way, let alone fix anything. But there has to be in-service training on this. Some agencies have caught up. Some agencies have really done a good job. Some agencies, prehistoric times, don't care. They're troublemakers. I'll deal with them. Don't talk to them. They ain't no good. So, in the beginning, I discussed how law enforcement can't confuse the two. I don't want you to confuse this movement with the FTAA group that I talked about, which could be construed as Antifa today. Now, are some of them doing this? Yeah, of course they are. Of course they are. And you can go to YouTube and you can put down First Amendment audit, and you'll see some of these guys are horrible. They're horrible. They're pee-peeing in their pants when they encounter police. They really don't know what to say. They just copied some guy off on YouTube. It looked easy, and then all of a sudden the cops showed up, and oh crap, they don't know what they're doing. But when you do know what you're doing, when you're doing it for a purpose of educating, I agree with you. I don't agree with being nasty. That I don't. Now, I know cops can be nasty. You talk about nasty? Two things. Never ask cop for money, because then you're going to see the nastier side to nasty. And never defy an officer of his authority, because then you'll see the nasty side of nasty again. So the rule here is that you don't want to show up in uniform, that your ego shows up first, and about 3 to 4 seconds later, your actual body shows up. This is a common occurrence in law enforcement. There are people that would listen to this podcast that are active in law enforcement saying, bro, don't listen to this guy. This guy's full of it, man. Why don't I'm not subscribing anymore? And they get all pissed off. And I know that's going to come. My foot's on the line right now. Yeah, keep it up, buddy. One more sentence and we're going to boot you out. I know that. But the thing is, you're not prepared for the next event. So you're gonna be the next 1 million hit on YouTube for being an idiot. So you can say whatever you want to say, but do you know the First Amendment? Can you recite the statute? Look at this guy's technique. If you've got a badge in your wallet or in your uniform, you need to perfect your craft to look like this guy, like the opposition. All right? So if you want to call him the opposition, I don't see him as the opposition. I see him as a learning tool. But there'll be people that, he ain't not good, they're commies, they're always going to be there. Haters will always hate, my friends, always. So you've got to be prepared for that event. And so law enforcement has a lot that they can do in dealing with public spaces, video, how they test the Constitution and so forth, and really learning the rules. It's kind of a little bit, they have gotten a lot better, I would say, but one thing that I've noticed in a lot of this hundreds of films that I have seen, somebody always has to ask someone else, and it goes up a food chain to get the proper answer. Well, I see that as a mistake, because the jackass all the way on the top of the food chain needs to either work the front post at the door, or he needs to start sharing secrets, because they're making the agency or the government employees look really stupid. There's one in particular that had nothing to do with the gentleman I'm talking about, his group, but they went into a DMV. My gosh, I mean, it was literally the movie The Exorcist. They spit it out, green vomit out of their mouths. They were, you can't be here, call the security. They were off hinges completely. Only to have the guy, cops came, they told him to stand outside and, don't go in there. They don't want you in there. But have I broken any laws? No, you haven't, but just don't go in. Cops leave and he goes back in there. They didn't achieve nothing. But my point is, all these employees are on YouTube looking completely freaking idiotic. How in the world can you be a government employee and the first thing that comes out of your mouth, I don't give you permission to film me. Really? Who are you? So when you take a position as a servant of the people, you serve the people, and that means these people are going to come out there. Look, there's all kinds. We know the ones you stop at a traffic stop, and they lower the window to a quarter of an inch and try to squeeze their license out, if they even want to give it to you and tell you that they're a citizen of the free world. I'm not talking about those people. They're special people, and there's special places for special people. But when you're being trained by lawyers for this type of verbal judo combat, law enforcement needs to be prepared. So there's a lot that we can talk about here. This is just the beginning. I will post a couple of his videos on there so you can see what I'm talking about. And I will close with these final thoughts. It is so important for us as law enforcement officials to know that there are so many roads that we haven't even thought of that we will be going in to enforce laws. You can't enforce a law if you don't know the law. So that means put up or shut up, time to have some real training, some scenario-based training like they did in CAT with the mentally ill folks out in the street, and some readiness drills. Make sure that your troops really know how to handle this. And that can be done in training. And I know there's a lot of upper brass that would say, I'm not wasting any money on that crap. Well, if you're not going to spend money on that crap, if that's what you have to say, you will spend money in court, and you will spend money in lawsuits. So don't get it. I don't understand it. So it's a must. It has to happen. It has to happen. We will continue. We will stay focused on this subject. The First Amendment audit. It is in our Think Out of the Box series. Slowly, we will creep one or two of these in our Train Up series to train you on specific body positioning, verbal judo, and some aspects so law enforcement won't look so stupid. As always, folks, it is my honor and my pleasure to be your host on Raider Cop Nation. As always, I encourage you to continue seeking prayer, first of all, and most importantly, for yourself, for your family, for your community, for the police agency that serves you in your community, and for the United States of America. This is Alpha Mike. I'm out.
And guide her through the night with a light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet.
Three. Somewhere right about the heart. 4323 QSR 1322.